My brother raised his glass at the Christmas dinner and said, "Cheers to the Gonzáles, except for Tony, the loser of the family who has nothing but money." My parents laughed and nodded, and then I raised my glass and said, "To the loser who will stop paying your bills." And they laughed, not knowing that in a few days they would be evicted. It was Christmas Eve, and my parents' house was as it always was, twinkling lights, a tree loaded with shiny ornaments, and that nativity scene we'd been using since I was a kid. The smell of turkey, mashed potatoes, and punch filled the air, but there was something else too. That family tension nobody says out loud, but everyone feels. The Gonzáles family were experts at pretending everything was fine, even though inside, things were always on the verge of blowing up. And that night they did. At the table were the usual suspects. Dad, in his plaid shirt and that belly that just kept growing, carved the turkey like he was the chief of a tribe. Mom, with her red apron and hair pulled back, served the food while tossing out jabs about who didn't help in the kitchen. My uncles and cousins chattered about nonsense, football, the cold. And then there was Mike, my older brother, the king of the family according to everyone. There he was, with his winter smile, his girlfriend Sarah, a gorgeous woman who looked like a model, and their two perfect kids who said thank you without anyone prodding them. And then there was me, Tony, the loser. That's what they called me since I could remember, and not because I didn't have money or success. On the contrary, I was the one with the cash. My auto parts business didn't make me a millionaire, but it covered my apartment, my car, and a stack of extra bills. The problem? No girlfriend, no wife, no friends, no social life. I spent my days working, up at 6 in the morning and in bed by midnight, checking numbers, delivering orders, building what I'd made with my own hands. To them, that was worth nothing. Poor Tony, they'd say, so alone, so boring. Meanwhile, Mike was the hero, always partying, a girl on his arm, tons of friends, and a life everyone cheered for. Didn't have a job? Didn't matter. Didn't have a dime of his own? Who cares? Because I was there to keep them all afloat. Yeah, that's how it was. I paid for everything. When Mom said the washing machine broke, who pulled out the wallet? Tony. When Dad wanted to paint the house or fix the roof, who shelled out the cash? Tony. And Mike, the great Mike, always had an excuse. I blew the money on a night out with the guys. Sarah needed a new dress. The kids have swimming lessons. And me, like an idiot, I paid. The mortgage on his house, the kids' school, even the vacations they took every year. My parents weren't any better. They lived off what I sent them each month because, according to them, the pension isn't enough. Meanwhile, Mike strutted around like the perfect son, and I was the fool who didn't know how to live. That night, dinner went as usual. Everyone ate, laughed, and passed the plates, until Mike decided it was time to shine. He raised his glass of wine I paid for, by the way, and tapped it with his knife to hush everyone. "A toast," he said, with that actor's voice he used when he wanted to impress. "Cheers to the Gonzáles family, except for Tony, the loser of the family who has nothing but money." The table erupted in laughter. Dad let out a guffaw so loud he nearly spat out his turkey. Mom nodded, wiping a tear like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. My uncles laughed out of obligation, and Sarah smiled with that "I'm not getting involved, but I'm still amused" look. Mike shot me that mix of pity and superiority he always stabbed me with. "See, Tony, that's why nobody loves you. Working all day, no girlfriend, no friends. How sad." And they all laughed again. I felt a knot in my stomach, but it wasn't sadness. It was rage, a rage that had been building for years, fed by every comment, every poor Tony, every time they used me as their personal ATM and then treated me like I was worthless. I looked at my glass of soda, because I don't even drink alcohol, another thing they love to mock, and raised it slowly. Everyone quieted down, expecting me to say something to keep the joke going. "To the loser," I said calm, almost smiling, "the one who will stop paying your bills." The table burst into laughter again. "Oh, Tony, what a riot," Mom said, patting my shoulder. Dad nodded, saying, "That's my boy, always with his little jokes." Mike looked at me with a raised eyebrow, like he was thinking, poor idiot, doesn't even know how to clap back. But it wasn't a joke. They didn't know it, but I did. In my head, it was crystal clear. I'd been mulling it over for months, and Mike's toast was the straw that broke the camel's back. Because the loser had something they didn't control. Control over the money that kept them afloat. And in a few days, they were going to learn that the hard way. Dinner went on like nothing happened. They talked about the cold, how Mike and Sarah were taking the kids to see Santa, how expensive the grocery store was getting. I smiled, ate my turkey, and nodded when I had to. But inside, I was counting the hours. While they planned their Christmas shopping with the money they expected me to give them, I was planning something much bigger, the day the Gonzáles family would lose their cash machine. And it wasn't going to be pretty. When I said goodbye that night and got into my car, I glanced at the house in the rearview mirror. The lights were still twinkling, and from the outside, everything looked perfect. But inside, things were already falling apart. And I was going to be the one to finish knocking them down. I got to my building, pulled out my phone, and checked the calendar. It was December 25th, early morning. In 5 days, on the 30th, Mike's next mortgage payment was due. My parents would also expect their monthly deposit on January 1st, like clockwork. They always sent me a text on the 28th or 29th with that mix of victimhood and sweetness. Son, can you help us this month? You know the pension isn't enough. And Mike, he didn't even bother asking directly. He just let Sarah call me with her soft voice, saying, Tony, we're a little tight. Can you help us out? But this time, there'd be nothing. Not a cent. It wasn't a snap decision. I've been thinking about it for months, though that night at dinner was what gave me the final push. Every time I put money in their accounts, it felt like they were taking a piece of something from me. It wasn't just the cash, it was the respect. They lived their perfect lives, parties, trips, new clothes, while I worked like a dog and got mocked for not having a girlfriend or friends. And for what? So Mike could show off his nice house and his kids in fancy schools, all paid for by the loser. So my parents could talk about how tough it was to live on little while I covered their water, electric, and even the Netflix they used to watch their shows. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. There was my savings, the money I made from the business, the transactions from the last few months. Then I looked at the automatic transfers I'd set up, one for Mike, one for my parents. I canceled them with a click. It was so easy it almost made me laugh. 2 buttons and done. The flow of money that kept them afloat stopped like I'd turn off a faucet. I didn't feel guilt or fear. Just a weird kind of calm, like when you finish a heavy job and realize you don't have to carry it anymore, that I spent the rest of the early morning planning. I wasn't going to tell them anything yet. I wanted them to figure out on their own, to feel the hit when the bank sent a insufficient funds notice or when Mike's landlord showed up with a sour face. I knew they'd come running to me with tears or yells, but this time I wasn't going to cave. I decided something bigger. Not only was I done paying them, I was done with them in my life. If they loved mocking the loser so much, let's see how they managed without him. The next morning, December 26th, I woke up early as usual, made coffee and got to work. The business didn't stop, not even for Christmas. There were orders to check, clients to call, parts to ship. While I was answering emails, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. Son, wasn't dinner lovely last night? Mike's a wild one with his antics, but we love you so much. I smiled but didn't reply. It was the typical smoothing things over text, like a we love you could erase years of disrespect. An hour later, another one came, this time from Sarah. Tony, can we see you soon? The kids want to hang out, and Mike says you're the best uncle. Sure, the best uncle with a wallet. I thought I didn't respond to either. I went on with my day, working and organizing everything like it was nothing. But deep down, I knew the clock was ticking. The 30th was right around the corner, and with it would come the first blow. Mike's mortgage wouldn't get paid. The bank would give them a couple days grace, maybe until January 2nd or 3rd, but then the letters would start, the calls, and eventually the eviction notice if they didn't come up with the money. And my parents, when they saw no deposit hit on January 1st, they'd panic. I could picture Mom crying on the phone and Dad yelling at me about how I could do this after all they'd done for me. But I was ready. For the first time in years, I felt free. No girlfriend, no friends, no parties, but I had something they didn't, control over my life. And soon, very soon, they'd realize the loser wasn't as useless as they thought. The days after Christmas flew by, as they always do when you're waiting for something big. The 26th and 27th, I worked nonstop, answering emails, coordinating shipments, and making sure the business was on track. On December 28th, the tone started to shift. I got a text from Dad, blunt as he usually was. "Son, where are you sending this month's money? You know the first is a holiday and banks get weird around these dates." I didn't reply. An hour later, Mom called. I didn't pick up, but she left a voicemail. "Tony, are you okay? We haven't heard from you, son. Call us when you can, okay?" Her voice had that mix of worry and sweetness she always used to guilt me. But this time, it didn't work. I turned off my phone and kept working on a big order that came in that morning. On the 29th, things got more serious. Mike texted me, "Hey, what's up with you? Sarah says you're not answering, and Mom's worried. Did you send this month's transfer or what?" There was the first hint that something was wrong. The mortgage was due the next day, and he knew I always paid a few days early to avoid issues. I didn't reply. Instead, I pictured his face, that mix of confusion and anger he got when things didn't go his way. He was probably at home with Sarah and the kids playing in the yard, thinking I was the same old Tony who'd rushed to fix their lives. The 30th hit like a freight train. I woke up early, made coffee, and checked my bank account. Everything was in order. My savings untouched, the business running smoothly, and not a penny transferred to anyone. I sat on the couch with my laptop and waited. It didn't take long. At 9 in the morning, my phone started blowing up. It was Mike. I didn't answer. He called 3 times in a row, then sent a text. "Tony, pick up, this isn't a joke. The bank sent me a notice, says the payment didn't go through. What's going on?" 10 minutes later, Sarah called. Her voice in the message was less sweet this time. "Tony, please call us. This is serious. The bank's saying they'll cut us off tomorrow if we don't pay." I did nothing. I sat there, sipping my coffee, watching their world start to shake. By noon, Mom and Dad joined the chaos. Mom called crying. "Son, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you answering? We need the money for the month. Please don't do this to us." Dad was harsher. "Tony, this isn't a game. Call us now, or I'm coming to your place to get you." On the 31st, New Year's Eve, it all blew up. I thought they'd spend the day scrambling for solutions, calling friends or the bank, but I was wrong. Around 3 in the afternoon, while I was going over some invoices in the living room, someone pounded on my buzzer like they wanted to break it. I peeked out the window, and there they were, Mike, Sarah, my parents, and even the kids, all crowded at my building's entrance. Mike's face was red, like he'd been yelling the whole way, and Dad was banging on the door with his fist. Mom stood back, arms crossed, and Sarah was holding the youngest kid while the older one ran around, and I opened the door because there was no avoiding it. The second I stepped out, Mike came at me. "What's wrong with you, Tony? Are you crazy or what?" "The bank's calling me, saying they'll take the house tomorrow if I don't pay," he yelled, so close I could smell the coffee he'd probably downed to calm his nerves. Dad jumped in too. "Explain yourself. Why didn't you send the money? We depend on you." Mom started sobbing in the background, saying, "Son, how can you do this to us? What did we do to you?" While Sarah stared at me like I was a monster that I tried to stay calm. "I'm not paying anymore," I said, crossing my arms. "It's over." Mike froze for a second, like he didn't understand the words. Then he exploded again. "What do you mean it's over? I've got kids, Tony, a family. You can't do this over some stupid dinner joke." Dad stepped forward, pointing at me. "You're a selfish bastard. That's what you are. After everything we've done for you, you're leaving us on the street? That's when I lost it. Everything you've done for me. What? Mocking me for not having a girlfriend. Living off my money while Mike blows it all on parties? I keep you all afloat, and you call me a loser." I shouted, and for the first time in years, I didn't care who heard me. Neighbors started peeking out their windows, but I didn't care. Mike tried to grab my arm, but I yanked away. "Don't touch me. If you're so worried about your house, get a job. And you too," I said, turning to my parents. "Stop expecting me to fix your lives." Mom cried harder, and Sarah started yelling that I was heartless. How could I do this to the kids? The little ones were scared, watching from the stairs, and for a second I felt a pang of doubt. But then I remembered the laughter at dinner, the cheers to Tony, the loser, and it passed. "Get out," I said, pointing to the street. "There's nothing for you here." Mike glared at me with pure hatred, like he wanted to hit me, but Dad held him back. "This isn't over. "Tony," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "You'll regret this." They turned and left, Mom crying, Mike cursing, and Sarah carrying the kids like they were heading to a funeral. That I shut the door and stood in silence. Outside, New Year's Eve fireworks were starting to pop, but inside my head, it was a whirlwind. I knew they weren't done, that they'd try again. But I also knew the loser wasn't backing down anymore. January 1st was a few hours away, and with it would come the real hit: unpaid bills, closed doors, and a lesson they'd never forget. That night, while the rest of the world celebrated with fireworks and toasts, I stayed in my apartment. I cracked open a soda, put on an old movie, and relaxed. I didn't need parties or friends to feel good. For the first time in years, I felt in control. And I knew that on January 1st, when the bank shut things down for non-payment, things would get even more interesting. January 1st dawned quiet in my apartment, but I knew it wouldn't be for them. I got up early, as always, made coffee, and sat in the living room with my laptop. No new messages on my phone, which surprised me a little after yesterday's circus. I figured they were either worn out from yelling at me or finally starting to look for a way out on their own. But I wasn't letting my guard down. The bank doesn't wait, and the deadlines they'd missed weren't going to fix themselves. Around 9, I checked my account again. Everything was still the same. My savings intact, the business humming along, and the automatic transfers canceled. I imagined what was happening at Mike's place. The bank would have sent the final notice by now. Payment not received. Next step, foreclosure. He'd probably be on the phone, arguing with some clerk who couldn't do anything for him. Sarah would be at his side, with that worried look she got when things spun out of control. And the kids, poor things, were probably confused, asking why Mom and Dad were so on edge at 18 my parents' house. The story wouldn't be much different. Without the January deposit, they'd have no way to pay the electric, water, or food for the month. Mom would be digging through her purse, counting the few bills they had left, while Dad paced back and forth, muttering, "This can't be happening." They'd always lived day to day, trusting I'd swoop in with the money right on time. But this time, the loser wasn't there to save them. January 10th hit like a sledgehammer. I woke up early, stomach churning. Not from fear, but from some kind of energy I couldn't explain. I knew what was happening today. Mike and his family were getting evicted. After days of begging, silence, and empty promises, the bank wasn't waiting anymore. And I wasn't going to miss it. Not because I wanted to gloat. Well, maybe a little. I wanted to see it with my own eyes, feel it, make sure this was all real. That I left my apartment at 8 in the morning, wearing a cap and an old jacket to blend in. I drove to Mike's neighborhood, a few blocks from his house, that big, nice house I'd helped pay for over the years. I parked on a corner near a park where I could see everything without being spotted. The bank's truck was already there, with 2 guys in suits flipping through papers. A couple of cops stood nearby, looking bored, and a small crowd of neighbors was starting to gather, whispering to each other. At T9 sharp, the front door opened. Mike came out first, in jeans and a wrinkled shirt, nothing like the polished guy who always bragged at parties. He was carrying a box stuffed with random stuff, the kids' toys, a picture frame, loose cables. Behind him was Sarah, eyes red and hair a mess, holding the younger kid while the older one ran beside her, crying. "I don't want to leave, Mommy," the little one wailed, and his voice hit me like a knife. But I didn't move point when the bank guys walked up to Mike with a paper in hand. "You need to sign here," he said, cold as ice. Mike glared at him like he wanted to rip his head off, but he grabbed the pen and scribbled so hard he nearly tore the page. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, tossing the paper on the ground. Sarah picked it up quick, whispering something to him, but he jerked his hand away and started yelling. "This is all because of Tony. That's selfish." The neighbors glanced at each other, some nodding like they knew what he meant. Then the real chaos kicked in. The truck guys started hauling out furniture. The couch where Mike watched football, the table where Sarah served fancy dinners, the giant TV I'd paid off in installments. Every item they dragged out was like another punch. Mike tried to stop them, shouting, "That's mine, don't touch it." But one of the cops shoved him back. "Calm down, sir, or we'll arrest you," he said. And Mike stood still, shaking with rage. Sarah sank onto the curb, the kids clinging to her, all 3 crying while neighbors snapped pictures with their phones. Suddenly, An old car pulled up nearby. It was my parents. Mom jumped out, clutching a plastic bag, screaming, "Mike, honey, what's happening?" Dad got out slower, face pale and shoulders slumped, like the hospital had drained him dry. When they saw Mike, Mom started bawling harder, hugging him while he kept staring at the furniture on the street. "It's Tony," Mike yelled, pointing at the air like I was standing there. "He did this." The loser left us on the street. Dad looked up, scanning the crowd, and for a second I thought he'd spotted me. I ducked lower behind the tree, holding my breath. Then something happened I didn't expect. Sarah stood up from the curb, still holding the kid, and marched over to Mike. "Enough blaming Tony," she screamed, with a fury I'd never heard from her. "You never worked, never saved, always waiting for him to bail us out. This is on you too." Mike spun around, face red with anger, and raised his hand like he was going to hit her. The cops moved fast, grabbing his arms as he thrashed. "Let me go," he shouted, but they pinned him against a truck. Mom covered her face, sobbing, and Dad just stared, like he had no strength left that I left before anyone saw me. Got in my car with shaky hands, drove a few blocks, and pulled into an empty lot. There alone, I let it all out. It wasn't tears, it was something bigger. Anger, sadness, satisfaction, all mixed together. I pounded the steering wheel until my hand hurt, yelling, "They deserved it." But then I went quiet, breathing hard, staring at nothing. The loser had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a fire that had burned everything down, including me. Update 1. Hey everyone. Thanks for the comments and support since I shared the Christmas dinner story and how I stopped bankrolling my family. It's been a few weeks since Mike's eviction, and I wanted to give a quick update on how things wrapped up because this chapter's finally closed. After losing the house, Mike, Sarah, and the 2 kids had no choice but to move in with my parents. My folks' place is small, just 2 tiny bedrooms and a bathroom that barely works. Since they haven't paid the bills, they've got no power or water, so they're living cramped and without comforts. My parents, who always let Mike be the spoiled one who did nothing, finally got fed up and forced him to work. Now Mike's got a job as a construction worker, something I never thought I'd see. Dad stepped up too, trimming bushes around the neighborhood for some cash, something he hadn't done in years while I was footing the bill. Me, I'm doing better than ever. The auto parts business keeps growing. I've got peace and no more texts or pleas from them. I'm done being their ATM. So that's where it stands. Them in their little house, no luxuries, finally working, and me free of it all. The loser came out on top, and it feels great.
Subscribe for more daily stories.